and welcome to another episode of Surrendered Birth Stories. Birth stories, birth education, and the pursuit of surrendering it all to God. Let's get started. When the rest of the women in your family have all given birth after 42 weeks gestation, it would be quite a shock to go into labor at 37 weeks. Today, we have the pleasure of hearing both of Anne's birth stories and the twists and turns along the way of her conception, pregnancy, birth, and postpartum journey, and how she was able to experience the supernatural peace of the Holy Spirit through it all. Well, welcome to another episode of the Surrendered Birth Stories podcast. I'm excited today to introduce you guys to Anne, who is going to share her two birth stories with us today. So, Anne, why don't you introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about you so we can get to know you a little bit.
Sure. So my name is Anne. I live in Durham, North Carolina with my husband, Nicholas, and we have two girls. The older is 2.5. She'll be 3 in November. And then the younger is 4 months. She was born this past April. And then we have two really cute, fluffy kitty cats and a big Great Pyrenees. We really love being outside. We have a real heart for taking care of the earth and growing food and eating food. So those are our main loves.
So, do you garden then?
Yes, a little bit. We don't really have the space that we wish we did to grow to the capacity we would like, but that's a dream. That's like kind of a long term, like 8 to 10 years from now, we want to have our own land.
Oh, that's awesome. Don't we all? I
Yeah, yes.
It's funny. I feel like in college we were all like, "Oh, I can't wait to get the house in the neighborhood with like the cute little fence
Mm,
and and now it's like, "Oh, I can't wait. I can't wait to move out on my own land."
I know, have space,
Yeah.
especially with children. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's get started. So, how did you find out you were pregnant for the first time?
Yeah, so this was in March of 2020, actually. Um,
Yay.
we had, yes, great timing. God has a sense of humor. We had been hoping to get pregnant. This was actually our second month trying, being intentional about getting pregnant. And um, I tracked my cycle, so I very much knew what was going on. But of course, we were not expecting to get pregnant right away. I think we were both trying to be pretty realistic about that it could take some time. Um, but we ended up getting pregnant my second cycle, which was March 2020. And I found out I was pregnant 2 weeks into lockdown on my birthday. So it was this kind of like mashup of emotions, excitement, um, the anxiety and curiosity about what it was going to look like to have a baby in a pandemic world. I think even at that point in March 2020, I was expecting it to blow over, honestly. Like I was just not expecting it to last as long as it did. But I did have a sense of, okay, everything is upending right now. Our lives are changing in a lot of ways. We were really struggling financially because we both worked in the service industry and that was being disrupted. But I did feel this sense of peace of this baby is meant to be here. They are meant to be a light in a dark time, and I'm going to trust that. Um, and my pregnancy with her, with Coulter, my oldest, was really great. I honestly only had probably 2 weeks of nausea the whole time, which I've learned is very unusual. And I was tired on and off, but I felt great most of the time. Really loved being pregnant. And I decided fairly early on that I wanted to birth in a birth center. I've always been really fascinated by birth, and I read Ina May Gaskin's Guide to Childbirth when I was like 19. with no babies on the horizon, just out of interest. Um, so yeah, I knew that I wanted to have an unmedicated birth, and I knew that yeah, that I wanted the environment to be a very particular way, and that that was more likely to happen at a birth center for me. And so, yeah, that was the plan, was to birth the birth center. And when I look back on her pregnancy, like I really don't have any major complaints. I feel like it was a real gift of a time and a really fun, joyful pregnancy.
So, you living in Durham, what birth center were you planning on going to?
So I went to Women's Birth and Wellness, which is in Chapel Hill. Um, Sadly, it closed the year after Coulter was born, but it is reopening in the next year. That's the plan. So they have new ownership, um, which is really exciting. They've gotten some investment, and I think there's just been like a community interest in making sure that that remains an option, which I'm really thankful for.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I was sad to hear that they were closing, but then equally as happy to hear they were
Yeah.
reopening.
Yes.
So, okay, it's first baby, first pregnancy. It goes smoothly. You enjoy being pregnant. You weren't really sick that much, which is amazing and rare. You are
Mhm,
correct.
mhm.
Um, and you make it all the way to the end. How far along are you when you went into labor, and what was going into labor like?
Yeah, so, I was not expecting to go into labor when I did at all. I have 2 sisters, and then I'm one of 5, and so my mom's birth stories, my sister's birth stories had all been 42 weeks plus when they went into labor. That was
Mm,
pretty much everybody's situation, and so I was expecting that. I think most first time moms, are expecting, hey, right at 40 weeks, I'm going to have this baby. And I, I was expecting, oh, it'll be a while. Like, at 37 weeks, I was thinking, I'm going to be pregnant for another 5 weeks easily.
yeah.
Um, Little did I know that I went into labor at 37 weeks, 3 days,
Wow.
which was completely unexpected. And I had been having contractions off and on at night for probably the past 4 nights, but honestly, that really didn't phase me because I figured, "Hey, I mean, it's just my body preparing," like, I'm just not gonna read too much into it. Then the night before I was 37 weeks, 3 days, same thing, I was having some sort of irregular contractions, and, I was able to sleep, and then at around 12:45, I woke up with a contraction, and then I felt like a gush of liquid, and I sort of woke myself up, and I sat up and I felt more of it, and I was like, "Oh no. Oh gosh. Okay. This is not at all what I was expecting." So I woke up my husband and I said, "I think my water broke." Which again was not at all I was not expecting that sequence of events because your water breaking, though it's portrayed in media as like the first thing in labor, very rarely is that the case. So, but I got up and I looked and there was like a big wet circle on the bed and it was still coming out of me. My husband ran into the bathroom and like got a pad and was trying to like put it under me in the bed, trying to like catch it so he could see what color it was. And I had a moment after I realized that it was my water that had broken, and I called my midwife and asked her about it, and she said, "Okay, like just check back in with me in the morning and let me know how things are going." There was about 30 minutes of panic, just like I was not expecting to go into labor right now. I was thankfully within the cutoff where I could still birth at the birth center, but of course, when you're not expecting to go into labor, there's all of these concerns rising up of why did this happen? Is something wrong with the baby? I don't know. It's strange, but I just felt this deep sense of peace wash over me, which I really do think was the Holy Spirit just giving me like a supernatural ability to be calm. And it's like all the fear just went out the window. I was like, I'm okay. This baby's okay. this is how it's supposed to happen. This is how my story is meant to unfold. We're just going to go with it. Like, I'm just going to go with the flow. Um, yeah. So I encouraged my husband to go back to sleep, which thankfully he did, which I was very impressed by. And I went downstairs to try to go back to sleep, but I just couldn't. And within about 30 minutes after my water breaking, I started having contractions again. And they started out about, I don't know, 8 to 10 minutes apart, probably. And I was just honestly too excited, too revved up. I was like, there's no way that I'm going back to sleep. So I ate some beef jerky and a banana and drank a ton of water. And then I just had this really tender time, sat on the couch and lit some candles, and I read Psalm 16 and Psalm 46. It was the 16th of November. Yeah, those two chapters will forever be very special to me, and I read them to my daughter now. But both of them are all about things coming against you, and there being challenges and things to overcome, and how God will enable you to ride the wave, literally, you know. And hypno babies is a way that I had prepared for labor, and so the idea of a wave, that's kind of coming in and crashing in on you was very visceral for the way that I had prepared for birth. And so that was the image that I had going into it, was the Holy Spirit is going to enable me to ride these waves, and he's going to be with me and help me overcome. And so I labored on my own like that for about 4 hours before I woke my husband up. And that was around 5:15 in the morning. I was starting to feel like I needed his support. And it's strange because I can't describe to you what that feels like. You just start to feel like you want someone there, at least for me. So he started rubbing my back. He started a bath for me. And my goal for this whole time was to labor as long as I could at home before I went into the birth center. During this time, we were in contact with my doula and also with the midwife, kind of just letting her know how things were going. I got in the bath around 6:30, thinking that things would slow down, kind of hoping that things would slow down, because at that point I'd only been in labor for about 5.5 hours, but they didn't at all. Things kind of intensified. So that's when I decided it was probably time to go to the birth center. And it wasn't necessarily so much, I mean, my contractions were probably 3 minutes apart at that point, but it wasn't necessarily so much the timing of the contractions as it was just a sense that it was the right time to go. And I can't really explain that, but there's just kind of this intuitive sense of this is the right time. And at the time, I didn't realize that my husband was having a hard time talking to the midwife. We had called the midwife on call and talked to her about what was going on. And she had had a hard time understanding us over the phone. And so she told us to call a different number. Apparently, she had been at the hospital with another woman, and she wanted us to call her back on a hospital phone. My husband called back on that same number to the hospital, which was not her personal cell phone, got someone on the line. He was trying to tell her, hey, we're headed to the birth center. He didn't know it was just some random person at the hospital. So this random person at the hospital, instead of saying, I don't know what you're talking about, I think you have the wrong person, said, okay, and just hung up. So Nicholas thought, they know that we're coming to the birth center, but they definitely did not know we were coming to the birth center. So we show up. It was a pretty intense ride to the hospital. It was to the birth center. It was about 25 minutes in the car. And I didn't know it at the time, but I was going through transition in the car. Yes, very fun. And I just remember doing horse lips, like the Ina May Gaskin horse lips technique the entire way there. And it was what kept me sane. But it was a beautiful morning. I mean, I remember looking out the window and saying, oh, Nicholas, that's my husband's name, Nicholas, it is such a beautiful morning. And I just felt like that was such a gift, that it was such a beautiful day. So we get to the birth center, we pull up. I am having a difficult time getting out of the car and making it into the birth center without having a contraction. So We get to the birth center, I have a contraction. I get out of the car, I walk 5 steps, I have another one. A midwife walks out. I am squatting in the parking lot, and she says, "Huh, looks like y'all are here to have a baby." And we said, "Yes, we are." And she said, "I don't know who are you? Like, are we expecting you?" Like, she didn't know who we are. There was what we came to realize was that no one knew that we were coming. She was actually not on call. She had come in to do something administration related, but she saw that we were there. And so she said, "Okay, I'm going to deliver this baby." I think she could tell that I was like fairly close at that point. So she was great. But she just took us in, turned right back around, got our gloves on, got her stuff out, like decided to examine me, all of that. So that was a funny turn of events. Interestingly, my husband, this whole time, he, for some reason, maybe because she walked out and didn't introduce herself as a midwife, he thought she was a front desk lady or a secretary of some sort. And so as she takes us back to the room, she's getting her gloves on, she's acting like a midwife. He's thinking, "What is this secretary doing, acting like this?" I think it was this sort of like labor brain that maybe some husbands can get where they're so fixated on whatever's happening with their wife that they start to get really confused. So after we got into the room, my doula also showed up, who was a wonderful asset to us. And they said that they wanted to check me before letting me stay, just to make sure that I was far along. They like you to come in hot and heavy, as they say. So when she checked me, I didn't want to know how far along I was dilated. I didn't want to get fixated on numbers. And I said, "If you'll just give me kind of a ballpark range of where I am." And she checked me and she said, "You're in the home stretch." I was like, "Okay." And I had just gotten to the point where I was thinking, this is getting a little too hard. I think I maybe said to my doula, "I'm gonna need something. I don't know what I need, but I need something." At that point, I had my bloody show. I was shaking, kind of like typical, transition signs. And thankfully, after they saw that I was in the home stretch, which they said when I got there, I was around 7 centimeters. She told me that I could get in the water in the tub, which was great. They had a really great big tub. And honestly, the next 2 hours after that, that was about 7:45 in the morning. Those next 2 hours, which was 7 centimeters through to her being born, are a total blur. I don't know if that's in part because of being in the water and the sort of like hypnotic way that water affects you. At least that's how it was for me. But it also was just an incredibly like inward experience. And so it did feel like a 2 hour long meditation in some ways. But the entire time, I really did feel a sense of peace and stillness. And like, I knew that the Holy Spirit was in the room with us and that I was going to be okay. And I'm really thankful that that was the deep sense that I had the whole time. So she was born at 9:55 in the morning. I pushed for about 30 minutes and she was compound presentation. So she had her hand kind of stuck behind her neck. So apparently her head came out and I didn't tear. But then when they saw that her body wasn't coming out soon after, the midwife did have to sort of reach up and kind of unhook her arm from behind her neck. And when she did that, I did get a third-degree tear from that maneuver. But honestly, it just felt like a lot of pressure. It didn't. I think in the moment there's so much other stuff going on that it didn't bother me. And I knew too, she'd been so hands off of the whole process that I was like, if she needs to do something, she's acting like there's something she needs to get in there and do. I'm going to trust her that there's a reason she's doing this, which is a great part of really trusting the medical professionals around you. So yeah, and then she came out and it was 9:55 and she was a beautiful little girl. She was 6 pounds, so she was little, but I mean, she was 37 and a half weeks. So that's kind of to be expected. And she was perfect, wide awake. very quiet, peaceful, happy baby from the start. So after she was born, I had as a first time mom, I was not expecting how weird delivering the placenta would be. um, and it didn't take that long, maybe 20 minutes or so, to birth the placenta. And it was an incredibly relieving feeling. I don't know if everyone has that experience, but it felt like I had just shed like 15 pounds, even though that's not how much it weighs. They did have to, sew me up from the third-degree tear, which I was thankful for lidocaine. They actually, like, injected me with lidocaine when they did it, which was nice. Because I had done it unmedicated, I was like, "Hey, the birth is over. Like, if you wanna put some lidocaine in there, that's fine." Um, and I also asked for ibuprofen because the after pains, after giving birth, can be pretty intense. They weren't super intense with my first, but it was still enough where some ibuprofen in the first 24 hours was nice. Yeah, it was a really sweet time. I mean, the golden hour really is an apt way of describing it. A birth center is a very home-like environment, so we got to lay in this, big queen size bed, and we ordered our favorite Mediterranean food from down the street, and just got to soak in being together. We were very uninterrupted, which was really nice. And there was a sense of being really cared for, but also it felt like the nurses and the midwives had a lot of reverence and respect for us as a family unit, and us kind of like learning each other for the first time. Of course, calling friends and family was hilarious because they were not expecting at all that we would have had a baby. And only my parents even knew that I was in labor. So both my husband's parents, my siblings, close friends, everybody was completely surprised. But it was a really fun time. Postpartum with her was challenging because my husband went back to work a week after she was born. He didn't have any kind of paid leave, so he just had to take a week off of work, unpaid, and then go back a week later. And at that point, he was actually working 3 jobs, and one of the jobs had 12-hour shifts. So about 3 times a week, he would have a 12-hour shift. And so a lot of times he would leave before our daughter was even awake for the day, and he would come back after she had gone to sleep for the night. And those days, too, he also had our car. So I would be without a car at home all day. And so if I wanted to see anyone, have any kind of conversation, I would just have to walk somewhere and, find people to talk to pretty much. I was really thankful for a coffee shop about a mile and a half from our townhouse at the time because I went there pretty much every day. I would walk the mile and a half there, get a cup of coffee, have a conversation, with the people that worked there, walk back. And it just gave me like a little bit of a routine every day in the early, first 6 months or so. Thankfully, my physical healing was really straightforward. I didn't have any major hiccups with that. Breastfeeding at times was challenging. She did have a tongue tie, but I think honestly most of it was she just had a really tiny mouth because she was on the smaller side, and she's just kind of a petite girl anyways. So I did have to have a lot of help at the beginning, and I was really thankful for some lactation consultants at the birth center who helped me with that. I would really recommend to anyone that they see a lactation consultant because 9 times out of 10, the problem that you're having can be fixed and can be remedied, if we just ask for help. At least that's what I've learned. The first 6 months were definitely intense. I would say after that, our schedule eased up a little bit. I was able to return back to part-time work, and our life became a little bit more manageable. So,
I love that you did the coffee shop walk every day. I love that.
yeah, I mean, you do what you can. That. It really is what kept me sane.
Hey, I'm with you. I go crazy if I have to be at home all day, every day.
Mm,
We had a time where we were sharing a car as well, and my
mm.
husband would go off to work, and it was like winter, and I'm like, oh my gosh, we're trapped here. I remember because our first was a girl as well, and I put her in the stroller and like just drove her around the house, around the living room, around the like, around the dining room. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going insane.
Uh-huh. Yeah, and winter is especially hard too because it's not like you can just put a picnic blanket out and hang out in the front yard, you know?
Yeah.
You have to find things to do.
My skin is toughened up a little bit now. I think I'd be a lot more willing to because last year, this is a total tangent, but last
Uh-huh,
year I had a goal of going on a walk every day with my youngest.
uh-huh.
Um, and we did it. I mean, barring like rain and or if I was sick, that
Yeah,
was like the only time we didn't do it. And I remember it was 23 degrees outside. There was snow on the ground and we went on that walk. Like, I
yeah,
bundled him up and bundled me up, and we went out, and he was great. He
yeah.
didn't complain at all. He loved our walk. So, um, yes, so I do better now in that situation. But back then, I was just like, I don't know what to do. It's cold outside, and I have a baby, so we're trapped.
Right. Oh.
Okay, sorry about the tangent. Okay,
Oh, no, that's great.
so you have your daughter, and
Yes.
then we know you had a second. So,
Yes.
was the second one planned or a
Yes.
surprise, or what happened there? Tell us about your second experience.
Yeah, so, we knew that we wanted to try to wait about 15 to 18 months or so between the end of, the pregnancy with my first and getting pregnant with our second. That was just a timeline that we felt like worked for us, for our family. I also it's really important to me to make sure that I'm replenishing my body and taking care of my body and it being in a good place physically, for to be the best vessel it can be to carry a child. So we waited to start trying for our second, and we started trying when Coulter was about 15 months old. And soon after we started trying, all three of us got COVID, um, which was the worst. We had made it at that point, it had been 2 years. And yeah, we were very annoyed about that. And after we had COVID, my cycle was just all over the place. I think the main thing that it did was really take my progesterone, which, as you know, is extremely important for sustaining a pregnancy. And so we tried for about 3 months after that and weren't getting pregnant. And I was noticing that my luteal phase, so the part of my cycle after ovulation, was fairly short. And I knew that to be a warning sign of, hey, your progesterone is just not there. I ended up talking to my primary care provider, who's amazing. She actually specializes in women's endocrinology, and she has a specific heart for prenatal and postpartum care for women. And I met with her, and she said, hey, I have seen COVID affect couples like this a lot. Usually it takes 4 to 6 months for your body to kind of get back to normal. She predicted, it'll be interesting to see if there's any research about this in the future, but she predicted that that would be one of the main disruptions of COVID, is cycle disruptions. So she suggested that we stop trying and wait and watch my cycle, listen to my body. She said, I really think the wise thing is to just let your body recover before you try for a baby again, which was not at all what I wanted to hear. I mean, I got off the call with her and just cried and cried because I felt like, even though it had only been, 5 months since we had started trying, when you're in that, it feels like a really long time. And I think as soon as you open your heart up to another baby and you feel like you're ready for that, suddenly you want a baby right now. It's just this weird like switch that flips. So that yeah, that was really difficult. And I think I too felt some concern about if we do get pregnant and I have a miscarriage, is it because of COVID? Is it because I haven't taken care of myself? There was just a lot of things to consider. And ultimately, we decided that we were going to wait. We were going to test my progesterone in the second half of my cycle and see how it was looking. There's this great company actually that I feel like I can recommend. Usually, I'm not usually for things that you can order in the mail, but it's called Prove, Proov. And they have LH tests, but the thing that was really helpful for me was they have PDG tests, which is essentially like a metabolite of progesterone in your urine. And so there's test strips for it. And so you can test, usually starting around, I think it's maybe 8 days or so after you've ovulated. You can test to make sure that your progesterone is staying high through the critical implantation stage. So I knew that that would give me like another kind of layer of confidence going into trying for a baby again, just to know, hey, like my body's at a good place. So that next month I did that, and my cycle was like totally back to normal. It was like really high progesterone the whole time, a nice long luteal phase. I felt really good. And I had been expecting, 6 months more of it being irregular. So we decided to try again the month after that, which was last July. And we got pregnant with my daughter Willa, who I didn't know was a girl at that point. We didn't find out the gender with either of our babies, so they were both a surprise. And we were super excited. It was just, I think, especially after the 5 months of wondering how long it was going to take, there was just a big sigh of relief when we found out we were pregnant with her. So yeah, that was July of last year. And my pregnancy with her was completely different than my pregnancy with Coulter's. I was really, really sick, really, really tired. I don't know if that's just because she's a second baby. Everybody was saying, oh, it's probably a boy because it's different than your first, and your first was a girl, which now I've realized they were both girls and they were totally different. So I don't think
There
any
goes
of that.
that theory.
Yes, I'm like, I don't think that actually applies. Um, I don't know. I don't know what it is. Maybe one day we'll know why our bodies do that. But yeah, I was just so sick, and my coping skill for that was to chew on mint gum first thing in the morning. This is another recommendation that I have. If you're really struggling first trimester, if you have mint gum with you at all times and you chew on it first thing in the morning, if you try to get some food down, eat the food, then chew mint gum right afterwards. And I know it sounds crazy, but it really did get me through the first 3 months of pregnancy. It really helped abate the nausea. I don't know why. So, yeah, that was pretty miserable. And I don't think at the time I realized that I was honestly depressed for those first 3 months. But when you don't feel good for that long and you can't eat things and you don't have energy to do everything and you're taking care of a toddler and you want to be present with her, but you can't, it's just like, yeah, everything just felt like a challenge. And I think only after getting out of the first 3 months did I realize, oh, like I was actually pretty depressed as a result of all of that, which I think is really normal. And I talked to a friend about it actually when she went through her first trimester. And she said, I felt really bad about feeling sad, like
Yeah.
I'm pregnant. I shouldn't feel sad. And I hope that it can be helpful for people listening. Like if you're feeling guilty about being sad, you don't have to, because I think it's all part of the transition, and it's also all part of God preparing us for motherhood, because there's a lot of self-sacrifice involved, and I think it actually can be an occasion to really lean into your own weakness and to trust Jesus and be dependent on him if we allow it to be that for us.
Yeah.
Um So after the first trimester, which as I was ending the first trimester, I had a great exodus from the first trimester because my husband and I actually spent 8 days in France together. And thankfully, I was starting to be less sick while we were there. So it felt like this really great, like turning of the page,
Yeah.
into second trimester. Got to actually enjoy some meals there. I still want to go back because I didn't enjoy them as much as I could have. If
Mhm.
I could have postpartum hunger and have meals in France as as the solution to that, that would be the ideal.
Yeah.
um, so yes, the rest of the pregnancy with Willa was very similar to Coulter's in that I really enjoyed being pregnant and felt, especially in the second trimester, felt really strong and healthy. Was really thankful for that. Third trimester towards the end was a little bit more difficult, this time with acid reflux, which I hadn't experienced so much the first time around. So I ended up having to just cut a bunch of stuff out, black tea, coffee, anything with tomatoes, kind of the main culprits. And I would do like apple cider vinegar shots, trying to help it be better.
Did those help you?
I don't know. I don't know if it was the things that I cut out or doing that, or I'm not sure because I was just trying stuff.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
I'm in the middle of that right now, and my solution so far has been milkshakes, which
Oh, does that
which
help?
it helps me, but
Oh, interesting. Okay.
um, yeah, because I decided I wasn't going to take Tums this time around. Anyways,
Oh,
but then I
yeah,
was like
yeah,
looking up other things, and I saw the apple cider vinegar shots, and I was like, oh, I don't know if I can do that. And then
yeah,
so I was just curious. Okay,
yeah.
maybe
It
I'll try
definitely
it.
helps with the nausea. I will say, like if you have
Really?
nausea from acid reflux, which I did have in the third trimester, it does really help with the nausea.
Well, that's good to know.
Yeah, yeah. So, and then, I did start to get uncomfortable towards the end of my pregnancy with Willa. Um, I would say more so than the first.
Wait, are we back at the birth center? Or
No, no, we are not. I should have mentioned that. So this whole time, because the birth center closed,
right?
the year after Coulter was born, I said, okay, well, my option is either to be at the hospital or do a home birth. And I was already leaning towards a home birth, but then when the birth center closed, it sort of made the decision for me. So I decided to do a home birth. So this whole time I was working with a home birth midwife in the area, who was terrific, and that was the plan. So then when I got to be 37 weeks, I was a little bit more on guard because of Coulter coming at 37 and a half.
I bet.
So most people at 37 weeks are like, "Oh, this means almost nothing." But for me, I was like, "I could have a baby this week."
Yeah.
Um, I had Braxton Hicks, I mean, probably starting at week 34, 35, somewhere around there. And nothing too intense. But then around 36 weeks, I got the stomach virus, which was terrible. Ended up having contractions for about 5 hours and lost part of my mucus plug. Um, and that freaked me out a little bit because then I was concerned about going into premature labor as a result of, you know, the upheaval, literally, of the stomach virus. Thankfully, I didn't. I was able to get well hydrated and those went away. And then when I was 37 weeks and 5 days, I had prodromal labor for a night, which completely threw me for a loop. It was about 5 hours of irregular but very intense contractions and very disorienting. They were so intense that my husband actually did call my doula and my midwife, and so my entire birth team came over that night. I kind of sensed in my heart that it wasn't the right time. Like I don't know. I just felt like it wasn't time for labor to start, and part of that was that the contractions felt wrong, which I don't know any other way to explain it. It just felt like they were not. true labor contractions, but they were just trying to do something. My doula suspected that baby probably wasn't in a great position, and so she said that she has seen oftentimes that if you have prodromal labor, it's your body trying to shift the baby in some way. I had been carrying really low for about 5 weeks at that point, and baby had been really down in my pelvis. And I think she had kind of been stuck in one position for a while. And so I did belly binding. So I was able to like pull her kind of up out of my pelvis, which I now swear by. I'm like, future pregnancies, I'm going to belly bind like all third trimester because I really think it made such a huge difference for me. And for the next 36 hours after that prodromal labor, I, thank goodness, was able to sleep. I got like 10 hours of sleep the night after. I drank some red wine to try to help me relax. I tried to just eat, rest on the couch, had my belly bound up like that. I did the mile circuit, which is, as you probably know, 3 different positions to try to help your baby be in the best position. And around 2:30 that following Monday, so about 36 hours after the prodromal labor on Saturday night, I started noticing that I was having some cramps. I let my midwife know, I let my doula know. We needed some groceries, and so I went and got some groceries at Harris Teeter and had a couple of contractions there and on the way back. I got home around 3:30 and was able to get a snack down, have a bunch of water, and noticed that they were coming a little bit more consistently. They were probably 6 to 8 minutes apart at that point. Around 4:30, I decided that I wanted to try to get into the bath. So it was within an hour, I started feeling like I needed some sort of support. And I told my husband, hey, with this is our 2.5-year-old, hey, our 2.5-year-old, like she's just gonna have to go in her room by herself. We were gonna have some friends that were gonna come and take care of her, but they couldn't be there until around 5:30. So I said, she's just gonna have to play in her room for the next hour. She was a great sport about it. I did not hear a peep. She literally just looked at books in her room. She was the sweetest thing. I think she just somehow knew, like, it's really important that I take care of myself right now. And Nicholas, my husband, was able to be in the bathroom with me. We did tell my midwife to go ahead and head this way, and my doula as well. Um, my midwife, my doula, and the people that were coming to take care of my older daughter all showed up around 5:30. Suddenly, everybody was in the bedroom and the bathroom with me, and they made sure that my blood pressure was good, the baby's heartbeat was good, and I didn't realize at that point, but I was starting to go through transition. So I got out of the tub and um, did a couple of contractions on the toilet because I knew the toilet was like really effective. And the bathtub, for whatever reason, had stopped feeling good, which I was surprised by because I thought I'll probably have another water birth. I did a couple contractions on the toilet and then I stood up for a few, which were definitely the most challenging, like holding on to my husband's neck and trying to just relax my pelvic floor through the contractions and kind of like let gravity do all the work. Talk about like the name of your podcast. That is a situation where you really have to surrender because when it's that powerful, there really is this sense of there is nothing that I can do except accept this and really lean into it. I mean, that is really what you have to do. So around that point, my dilation hadn't been checked this whole time. And so at that point, I asked if my dilation could be checked. So I just want to know, like, am I close? Am I like 4 centimeters? I have no idea. You know, they all said at the time they could tell I was close. But of course, when you're in it, you're kind of in denial that you are. So the midwife checked me and she said that when she did, she felt the baby's head. And so what she said to me was, you're close. So whenever you feel like you're ready to push, just go ahead. And I was like, oh, we're like that close, you know? So, I got onto our bed and went through a couple more contractions, and then I sort of just, like, propped myself up so that I was a little bit more upright, and just immediately felt all of this pressure, and I was like, "Oh, okay." Like, that yep, she wasn't kidding. I pushed for about 4 contractions, one of which was I asked my husband afterwards, I was like, "How long do you think that contraction was?" And he said, "I think it was about 2 minutes." It was, like, the longest contraction ever, but it was very effective because it took about 3 or 4 contractions, for her head to be born. It was really neat because though my midwives were there, my husband was actually the one that got to catch her, so the midwives are sort of on either side of him, but then he was really, like, front and center in the action, um, and my doula was at my head, so she was kind of coaching me and talking to me, through it, and then, my husband was ready to catch the baby, and she, was born around 6:17 that evening. The sun was shining. My midwives had opened up the windows, which maybe some people would not like because of people being on the outside, but I absolutely loved it because I could hear the birds and there was a breeze. Something that I had prayed for was that I would give birth during the day, and God definitely answered that prayer. So yeah, her birth was absolutely beautiful, and I would 100% have birth at home again, just because being able to finish that process and then lean back in my own bed on my own pillows was a amazing experience. So after um, she was born, she latched almost immediately, which was also different than I mean, my first daughter, she did breastfeed pretty quickly, but Willa, my second daughter, it was really amazing because I got to experience almost like a baby led latch, which I had heard was possible but hadn't experienced. And so I really saw her just kind of like find her way to my nipple, which was so cool. And she just seemed to know what to do. And she was born on at exactly 38 weeks. So really similar to my first daughter, but she didn't have any complications or any health concerns or anything that would have made her come early. My midwife said, I think 38 weeks is just your term. Like that's just your body's term. Um, my husband says that my oven is just on a higher temperature. He's like, you're like, maybe other people are like 350 or like 400, it's just there's no way to predict.
So how big was
um
she?
yeah, so my first was 6 pounds. She was second was 6 pounds 6 ounces.
Oh, beautiful.
Yes. She was 2 inches longer, so she was 21 inches. So she was honestly like all arms and legs when she came out because she was still small, but all of her length was in her arms and legs. And yeah, being at home was great. I will say that I think my postpartum experience was very much affected by the fact that my husband had paternity leave. So he's been at a good job for the past year, and they're a fairly new company, and they decided on their paternity leave a couple months before Willow was born. Um, and so he got to be home with us for 8 weeks, which was just amazing. Yeah.
Wow.
Um,
What company is that? Because
I
people are
know,
going to want to
right?
know.
I know. I'm like, wow, we're finally maybe catching up with Europe like a little bit,
Right.
getting a little closer. So having him home and having him be able to be with my 2.5-year-old, and he does the majority of the cooking in our house. And so, I mean, what one of my favorite memories was like 2 days after I had Willa, him bringing me blueberry pancakes in bed, and
Oh.
just like the simplicity of that. And his pancakes are so good. And I just remember laying in bed thinking like, wow, like this really is the life. Like to have a new baby, to be able to enjoy having a new baby, and then to have someone bring you pancakes, you
Yeah.
know? Um, so yeah, postpartum experience, very different. second time around. And I think it did solidify that support is so important, and not just people being around, because I think especially for introverts, which I'm very much an introvert, just having anybody around isn't restful, but having people around who really know you and can can help you in ways that are actually helpful, is
Yeah.
such a game changer. So yeah, so that's the story with Willa, and she's now 4 months old. So I would say I've kind of just exited like the postpartum newborn phase.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What I like to call the fog.
Yes, it is.
It's a really
Yeah,
sweet, precious fog, but it is a
it
fog.
is. It is. Yeah.
Well, is there anything else you want to share with us before we end?
Yeah, I would say that something that I really learned about myself through both of these births is to trust the wisdom that God has written into my body. I think that I have always been a self-doubtful person, and I've always been skeptical of like trusting myself and trusting my own voice. And I think that what birth has taught me is that, like, especially when we're in partnership with the Holy Spirit, we can have confidence in ourselves, and we can trust ourselves because we trust that He has made us good, and that He's going to be with us and speaking to us through the whole process. I think I came out on the other side with just like more self confidence and more of a boldness about my own voice, and being able to say, this is what I want to do. And I believe this is good. And then going for it, and
Yeah.
experiencing some of the rewards of that on the other side. So yeah, I'm thankful for the ways, like I really do see birth as being sort of formational for me, in my spiritual life. And I'm grateful for that.
Well, awesome. Well, I just want to thank you so much, Anne, for coming on and sharing your stories and just being willing to be open and vulnerable with us. And I'm sure
Yeah.
that everybody will be able to either relate or learn or be inspired in some way, shape, or form. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks again for joining us today. Be sure not to miss an episode by hitting subscribe. Also, we'd love for you to leave a review of the show so that more people like you can hear more stories like these. If you're local to the Triad of North Carolina and seeking childbirth classes, birth consultations, or a birth doula, please click on the link in the show notes to take you to our website for more information. Just as a reminder, this show is not giving medical advice, so please continue to see your personal care provider as needs arise. Also, if you would like to be a guest on the Surrendered Birth Stories podcast, please click the link in the episode show notes to get in touch with me. We hope you have a great week, and remember, learn all that you can, make the best plans, and then leave it in God's hands.